Alright, so today I want to get us a small introduction to AP Statistics, which is MDM4UE, and I will also be covering all the materials for regular statistics, just so we don't miss on anything. Alright, so and we're using the book Stats Modeling the World for AP, which prepares you directly for the AP exam. So let's get started. So chapter 1 doesn't talk about too much. Give us a brief introduction about, oh my god, why does this not work? Giving us a brief introduction about what is statistics. So that is going to be the question of our entire unit 1, is to understand data and understand what these data is trying to tell us, and understand some basic tools that we're going to be using to analyze these data, and basically to understand what statistic is. So statistics is a course that is usually, I would say, usually disregarded during the high school career, especially when everyone is focusing on regular math and calculus. Statistics is just kind of there. So statistic is a way of reasoning with tools and methods to help us understand the world using data. And statistic itself basically means we are doing particular calculations made from data. So data is a huge part of this, and throughout our entire course we're going to be learning different tools and different data type, and we're going to try to analyze them. And data are values along with their context. So the idea of data and anything in statistic is that there's variations. If there's no variations existing from these data, then the data is pointless to us, because we want to analyze if there's patterns in these variations, why these variations exist, and obviously it's the whole point, it's the whole existence of data. And because data will vary, because we don't usually see everything. Data is a very complex concept. Whenever we try to gather data, it's really hard for us to get everything. So obviously there's going to be variations, and we are not perfect. We measure imperfectly, and people/things are different and constantly changing. If no variations exist, we do not actually need statistics. So statistics, instead of saying it's an analyzation of data, it should be analyzing of value and analyzing of the variation existing between these data. So there's a 3-step process of data or statistics. First, you want to think, and this kind of applies to other subjects as well. So let me open a new text box. Ooh, blurry, because it's too small. All right. So I want to make sure that this thing could be saved and could be uploaded somewhere after. So the 3-step process of statistics. Let's enlarge this text box. So 1 is think. We want to know where we're headed and why. In context is identifying the problem and planning the approach. And step 2 is to show the mechanics, the calculations, displays, any analysis. Not the most important part. And 3 is tell, explaining your results to someone else so they understand your work. So in math, in regular math, especially calc and functions, showing part is very important. And showing part is probably the most important. Showing your teacher that you know how to do the function, you know how to take a derivative or take an integral, or find the method of finding a certain arc length. It's very important, but in statistics it's completely different. We always want to explain our results more than we want to show it. We have to be able to explain what each result means, especially in context, and a lot of things, and a lot of marks are taken off on the AP exam just because of explaining. So this is chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 1 is too short. And this is the entirety of chapter 1. It's just telling us some introduction about statistics, like meeting a new friend. Okay. Now, let's get into chapter 2. So chapter 2 tells us data are useless without context. And to provide context, we use the 5 W's. Use the 5 W's and H. So as you could have expected, the 5 W's are who, what, when, where, why, and the H is how. So who is the individual cases / object described by the data. So what is the data describing? We want to talk about the subject. And what? So which characteristics are recorded along each who? The where. So the location of where the data is collected. The when, time the data was collected. Why, the purpose of the data collection. And how, so the method of collection. So when we have a table, the rows often represent individual cases while a column represents variables. So you know how you have a table and then there is like traits. So table something like this. Let me do pencil. So something like this, where you have a table, and so this is case A, this is case B, and let's say this is less than 50, less than 5, greater than 5. Less than 5, greater than 5. So let's say A is greater than 5, B is not, and A is less than A is not less than 5, but B is less than 5. So this is, you have the rows that represent the individual cases, while the variables are over here. So are they greater or less than 5? And we can always classify our variables. We can classify our variables based on the y. And this brings us to categorizing variables into, well, I guess 3 different categories. So we have 1, the categorical variables. So this places individual cases into groups. EX, their gender, ticket class, etc. So you're encouraged to think of a little more categorical variables. And then we have quantitative, which measures a numerical quantity with units. So make sure that there is units. So whenever you have a quantitative variable, you always have units. So units is kind of important. If you don't have units, you don't have a quantitative variable. Identifier. So a unique label to each case. So let's say student ID or road number. These are all identifier variable. So they aren't technically a variable. Instead, they are actual individual case. Special cases to variable classification. So there are ordinary or ordinal variables. Categories with natural order. So for example, star rating. They could be categorical or quantitative, depending on different cases. So for example, what I did here, if you look at it's just numbers, you might think it's quantitative. However, since I did less or bigger than 5, this is actually categorical. We're putting them into 2 categories. So when we have a star rating, we could say more than 3 stars or less than 3 stars. Or if we want to be quantitative, we want to put them in categories of 3.5, something like that, a number. And there are ways. If a variable has numeric values, this doesn't automatically mean it's quantitative. We should always check the context. And a tip to do this is, when shown a few numbers in a variable, you should always ask yourself if it's reasonable to take the average of them. If yes, then it is likely quantitative. If not, then categorical. So in our case, when we have this A and B, and we want to see, does it make sense if I want to take the average of, let's say, A and B? It doesn't. It doesn't. When we take the average between A and B, we get nothing useful to us. But if we want to, so now we think about it, oh, it's just categorical because we want greater or less than 5. Anyways, that is basically it for chapter 1 and 2. There's practice work on page 3, 7, 9, 11, 13. Page 16, question 3, 7, 9, and just do any number that you like. Anyways, that is it. And for chapter 3, we'll be learning how to show data, and we're going to be describing categorical data.